In the dictionary, the word risk is defined as exposure to the chance of injury or loss. Well, in the case of the NFL draft, you might just as well spell it T-U-A. Tua Tagovailoa. Look, he finished college with the highest QBR of any quarterback in the 16 years that ESPN has tracked that stat. He has the highest passer efficiency rating in the whole history of the sport. He's number one all time. He was 22-2 as a starter at Alabama, and of course his most memorable game was one he didn't even start when he threw 3 touchdowns off the bench to win the title in 2018. He threw 87 touchdowns at Alabama. That is a school that has 3 quarterbacks in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and those 3, Bart Starr, Joe Namath, and Ken Stabler, combined to throw 52. I get the times have changed, but still. So all of that is on one side. And then there's the other side, which includes 4 surgeries, a finger, both ankles, and of course, the dislocated right hip and fractured posterior wall that ended his college career. All those injuries came behind an offensive line that was not good, it was great. Bama allowed the fewest sacks of any Power 5 team the last 2 seasons. So you know all about the injuries. Did you also know there's at least a little cause for concern beyond that? Did you know that 44% of the interceptions Tua threw in his whole time as a starter came in 2 games? One of them was a 28-point loss to Clemson for the championship. The other was that SEC title game where Jalen Hurts had to come off the bench and save Bama's bacon. Tua threw 4 picks in those games. He only threw 9 as a starter. So you factor that in however you choose. In the end, the way I see it is this. There has never been a greater risk-reward proposition in the draft than this player. And what the GMs have to decide is, which is riskier, to take Tua or to pass him up? Those are the questions. Let's go in search of the answers here. And I've got Laura Rutledge ready. And Laura, as you continue to give us all of the medical updates, I've never really had the chance to ask your opinion on this. How reasonable is it to factor in those performances in the big games against the really good defenses? His numbers didn't look the way they did the rest of the time. Is that a legitimate criticism or question?
It's absolutely legitimate. And here's what I would tell you, Greeny. Tua would say the same thing. That's one of the reasons why the decision to declare for the NFL draft this year was so difficult for him, because he also feels there was unfinished business in his college career. He wanted to go and prove more. And unfortunately, the injuries, which are also a concern, didn't allow him to do that. You know, I think you look specifically at those games that you mentioned, the Clemson game that he struggled in that national championship on such a big stage. That was a game that really is on its own. Here's your biggest stage in this moment, and you didn't do that well. Clemson had your number that entire game. And then that Georgia game, he wasn't healthy, which, like I said, you know, you're kind of weighing all of this throughout. What I would tell you, too, is if you look back at this year, the game of the century that we all talked about, that Alabama LSU game, Joe Burrow against Tua Tagovailoa. Tua came back and played in that game, but I think we all know he was playing on one leg. I had asked him at one point how healthy he actually was in that game on a scale of 1 to 10. Greeny, he said a 10 because that was in his mind. But actually what his body was doing was much less than that. So all of these big moments that he would have had and something that he wanted to prove of being the best that he could be, he just hasn't been healthy, which is part of this entire conversation.
Yeah, so it's like, again, it's a jigsaw puzzle. You keep putting the pieces in until you get a full picture. Dan Orlovsky, is the criticism reasonable that he wasn't his best in the biggest games?
Of course it's reasonable, Greeny, but it also has to be placed with context. And to Laura's point, like that 2018 SEC title game, we all look at the 4th quarter when he gets stepped on and the knee and the ankle happen at the same time. The reality is he was hurt with 4 minutes into that game. 11 minutes to go in the 1st quarter, he does the initial ankle injury. And so he struggles with his health throughout that game. And then within 5 weeks or so, comes back against Clemson. Listen, that national title game against Clemson, Brent Venables got him. He had never seen a defense scheme-wise like what Venables was going to throw at him. Brent Venables makes every college quarterback look poor. If you really watch the start of the championship game this year with he struggled early on against Brent Venables in that Clemson defense and then eventually figured them out. Tua never did that. The reality is this, though. Tua at that point was 20. During those games, Tua was 20. Joe Burrow this year was 23. We often talk about the quarterback position as a developmental position. Tua had never experienced that before, whether scheme and struggle and failure. And so we've got to put it in context. Yes, that's a truth, but the reality was he was a very young player that never had the chance to learn from those mistakes.
Rex, let me give you the final word here. Is it riskier to take him or to pass him up?
Oh, I think it's riskier to take him. And when I look at it, if you're okay with every time your quarterback gets knocked down, he gets up with a limp, then it's not risky. But this pick truly is risky. And I want to say something. This kid, I don't think it has anything to do with the type of player he is, big games or whatever. He looked pretty good in a big game when he was a true freshman, when he came back and led his team to a national championship in the second half in that Georgia game. So to me, throw out the play. It's all about injury. And I can tell you this, if you get hurt, if a player gets hurt in college, he's going to get hurt in the pros.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.